Business Analysis, Elicitation Techniques. Welcome everyone. During this presentation, we will talk about elicitation techniques, meaning how a business analyst learns about the business in which his or her project will be executed. Elicitation is one of the most important parts in business analysis. Getting to know the business in depth will allow the business analyst to perform his or her job more effectively in the project. There are many techniques to be used. We'll discuss the most common ones that should be learned and practiced as much as possible by the business analyst. Naturally, not all the techniques has to be used in all projects. The more experience the business analyst has, the better he or she can judge which technique is suitable in the respective project to be used. We will talk about document review and observation, interviews, surveys, and questionnaires. We will also talk about facilitated sessions and focus groups. So let's start. Reviewing existing documentation is an extremely important technique, and as such, has to be mentioned on the first place. Every project has to start with reviewing existing documentation if anything like that exists. Existing documentation can be many things: existing user manuals, glossary of company-specific terms, etc. It helps the business analyst in many ways. It enables the BA to learn the company and software or project-specific terminology. Also, it helps prepare proper questions to be asked from the stakeholders. Reviewing the existing documentation in advance helps to save everybody's time. The BA does not need to ask unnecessary questions from the stakeholders and can concentrate on the ones that add value. It also has to be mentioned that all facts, numbers, and documents should be checked if they are up to date and relevant to the ones to use. Now let's see the next technique, which is observation. Observation is another important elicitation technique. The BA should understand how and where their stakeholders work. If possible, also try to work in the same office or area during the project. This helps communication and establishing trust with your stakeholders. The BA can also observe how the office setup looks like. Is it an open office or are there closed rooms as well? How is the management seated? Do the colleagues talk to each other? The information collected by observing can be used in determining the necessary communication style with the respective stakeholder. Also, if possible, go to the office, warehouse, manufacturing plant where the actual work is performed. It may help a lot in your project. Once you have observed your environment, you can start interviewing. If there would be two first places, interviewing would also be there next to documentation review. Interviewing is the best technique to elicit requirements. There should be a maximum of 2 participants to be interviewed together. The BA should plan the interview carefully. He or she should plan the time it will take, the questions, and the agenda. The BA should use information gained during the documentation review and observation to develop the most effective questions. Also, it is very useful to define an objective for you to reach during the interview. Always consider the level of the person being interviewed in the organization to be able to ask the right questions. Take notes because of 2 reasons. First, to remember what was discussed. Even if your memory is great, you need to remember all the details as well. Second, taking notes will create trust in the stakeholders who are interviewed. Once the interview is finished, you can summarize in writing what was discussed. Remember the professional writing training. Additionally, you may need to send follow-up questions. This will help you to include anything that was missed or remained unclear during the interview. Surveys and questionnaires. These are elicitation techniques that do not always have to be used, only if they are necessary. It is suitable to use if many people should be interviewed about the same questions. Think about a large user group, for example. Surveys and questionnaires can be formal or informal. Informal ones may be used to collect ideas. The format should be clear, easy to understand, and to fill in. Participants need to be told why the survey or questionnaire is sent to them and what the deadline is to answer. The survey should definitely not be long. It will decrease the number of respondents. It is also suggested to test the questions on a few users before sending it out to a larger population. Facilitated sessions. In the beginning of the project and in the requirements specification phase, it may be very useful to conduct facilitated sessions. It helps to gain information from several stakeholders. It is a key for the business analyst to feel when a facilitated session is needed. Facilitated sessions are usually used to reach an agreement on how a corporate process should be designed. In many cases, it is also used to generate ideas. It is a good opportunity for the BAs to gather and clarify requirements. Having facilitated sessions help problem solving and balance different stakeholder priorities. Sometimes, a solution can be found to a business problem during the session itself. The participants should be selected carefully so that every department who participates in the process discussed is involved. Facilitated sessions have to be planned and well prepared. It is not an open discussion forum. It should have a predefined structure and agenda that can be sent in advance to the participants. The BA has a very hard and challenging role as facilitator during the sessions. Usually he or she is the one who leads the sessions either alone or together with another BA sharing the facilitator role. The optimal setup is having one IT and one business expert in the BA role working together. One can lead the discussion when it falls into his or her expertise, and the other can take notes and they can change roles. Now let's move on to the next elicitation technique, focus groups. Focus groups are special interviewing sessions. The participants are randomly selected from the target group. The topic of the focus group is very specific. Usually, it is about testing a new product or product feature. You have to imagine focus groups as an informal interviewing session. The participants are interviewed in a comfortable location. Most of the time, it can be observed from outside with the use of two-way mirrors. What is the role of the business analyst? Usually, the BAs help to understand and determine the right pool from which the participants are selected, and also helps to prepare the questions to be asked. And finally, the BA is involved in the analysis of the results. Now let's summarize what we have talked about. There are many elicitation techniques to be used by business analysts to gain as much information about the business as possible. Elicitation is one of the key steps in the business analysis process. The first step is reviewing existing documentation, and the business environment has to be observed. Having these accomplished, the business analyst can start the interviews and, if necessary, send out surveys or questionnaires. There can be projects when the BA has to organize facilitated sessions and observe focus group discussions. And lastly, a well-done in-depth elicitation phase can be a good base for succeeding in the business analysis work. Thank you once again for your time and attention, and this is businesstraining.com, where you can earn a master's level qualification to make more money.